Hey, welcome back. This is Rebel. Welcome to another episode of The Underground, where we cut through the noise and bring you the real stories that matter. I'm Rebel, and today, here with my co-host Gia, we are diving straight into the heart of the Ukrainian front lines. Our guest is a man who has seen war up close, not from news reports, but from the trenches, the field hospitals, and the chaos where life and death hang in the balance. He's a combat medic, Callsign Squire, and he's here to share what it's really like to serve on the front lines of Ukraine's fight for survival. We're not here to sugarcoat anything or push any agenda, whether it's stories of courage under fire, the heartbreak of loss, or the moments that remind you why we keep going. Squire brings us the unfiltered truth from the battlefield to the bedside, and from Ukraine to wherever these stories need to be heard. So settle in as we pull back the curtain on the realities of war, at home and abroad. This is The Underground, and today we're telling it like it is.
And then I know your team is published as part of like the main group that was fighting against the Chinese, right? Not the Chinese, the Koreans.
Yes, it was during my last tour
Mm-hmm.
because, as you probably know, Russia uh, used North Korean troops
Mm-hmm.
uh, because there, as in Ukraine, Russia also has some problems with enlisting people, so
Mm-hmm.
they pay very big amounts of money in order to engage people to join army and
Yeah.
um, but what we can see here it's one-way ticket because they for example cross the border, our minds explode. For example, from
Mm-hmm.
the group of 6 people, 3 people survived and they move ahead.
Yeah.
And uh, there was a situation when like
Oh, sorry, I lost
uh,
lost you guys for a second or two. Okay. I don't know what that
like
was.
It was probably a glitch on my side. My computer's not cooperating.
Uh, well, also I noticed I had to open the link like on the web browser, I think, rather than like directly.
Huh, that's weird. But all right, so
Oh,
um, I guess the first we'll start. Not, I mean, I recorded a little bit of it just for, well, like I said, I'll go through and edit out what we can and what things and stuff like that. But um,
is
I
that
do.
music in the background on
Oh,
my end or your
is it
end?
still playing? Sorry.
It's okay. I was like, what is that? I was trying to make sure I didn't leave like a X link on or something else playing in the background.
No, it was. I forgot. I muted it instead of stopped it.
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's
Um,
fine.
so yeah, first off, I want to thank you for taking your time and for doing this, and like I said, and for helping us get out there what is actually going on down there instead of like relying on what social media and mainstream media do. Because like I said, we know the more and more I get into this, and more I get into
Hmm.
everything else, I realize that they lie to us on a continuous basis.
Yeah, it's highly edited, and each side, depending on what side of the mainstream media you're on or political party, they have a specific narrative. Whether it's Republican, sorry, I'm losing my voice, Republican or Democrat, each side, will edit the news based on their perspective or their own narrative or what they're trying to, kind of push. And you can see that through like some of the articles, the lines they put on there just to get some clicks.
Yeah.
So it won't necessarily reflect the actual story once you like start reading it, but it'll get you to click on it. And
Oh,
sometimes it
definitely.
has nothing to do with the story itself. I've noticed that lately.
Yeah. So that's why I think it's important that we get firsthand experience. Like I was telling him earlier, we talked to Long T, and then him coming on to get what's actually going on down there on a sort of like on a frontline basis, even though we're not there with you. But
Yeah.
um, so I guess the first question I have for you would be: is just like, how did you how did you get involved? I mean, what made you get involved with the fight?
No, it was a shock for all of us when Russia decided to start full-scale invasion, and like all the people at the beginning, they wanted to join the army. There were so much amounts of people near recruiting offices who wanted to join armies that at the beginning people even uh, paid bribes to join army. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
It was 2022. Uh, my motivation was very simple. I am engaged in all this process since 2014. I was a student studying at the university when the war has started from annexation of Crimea, and in that period, I was a volunteer, tried to help different units to get some gear to connect with some foreign media or to make some analysis. For instance, when there was a threat that Azov will be included to the list of foreign terrorist organization, I tried to help them to defend themselves in the media because mm, it was a kind of threat that if the United States includes other regiment uh, to the list of the foreign terrorist organization, it gives every country legal right to use Interpol to arrest every single soldier who travels abroad. And I understand why Russia did this thing because uh, when there was 9/11 in the United States, Russia decided to use it in order to justify all the war crimes in Chechnya because Putin was first person who called George W. Bush and told uh, George, we support the United States. We are going to fight with Islamic terrorism together with you. And when Russia was criticized for all the crimes which Russia did in Chechnya, they just told, but we fight with terrorism like the United States. I think you also know that Russia even joined the U.S. military operation in Enduring Freedom
Hmm.
for that. And the same thing Russians wanted to make with us, especially after the protests Black Lives Matter. All the American media started to talk more about white supremacy terrorism. And Russia started to distribute this propaganda. There are neo Nazis in Azov, so we fighting Nazi regime in Kiev in order to justify what Russia does has been doing in Ukraine for this more than 10 years, because uh, we know that there was very high criticism of far right organization in the United States, and even there was report written by the Sofan Center, headed by Ali Sofan, former FBI agent, who also compared Azov regiment with Al Qaeda and other terrorist organizations. And the Russian idea was the same, like in case of Chechnya, to show that Russia supports the same narrative as the United States.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was crazy. It's just like, because where we come from like you were talking about how the Russia and the United States were basically allies during Desert Storm and the conflict in Saudi Arabia, and then now it comes to the point now that everything's, I mean, everything's changed to where now, well, I mean, under Biden, they were still an enemy of the state. I don't know what they are now. I mean, it's kind of up in the air. if they're an ally, if they're an enemy anymore when it comes to Trump. But then again, that's what media you listen to and everything else. So it depends on what side of the aisle you're on that you hear the correct story.
The problem is that, as I told you before we started, Trump tries to measure everything with capitalist logic. That okay, I'm a businessman. I can negotiate with everyone. Made a kind of I made a lot of successful agreements. I wrote a book, The Art of
Part of the
the
deal.
yes, The Art of the Deal, and it doesn't work with Russia because Putin is a former KGB agent. He destroyed lots of buildings in 90s in order uh, to come to power. So it's okay for Russia to kill politicians, to kill journalists who tell the truth. I am not a follower of so-called good Russians and Russian oppositions, but if we talk about such journalists as Anna Politkovskaya, who wrote the truth about the war in Chechnya, she was killed, and it happened when Putin, in the day when Putin had a birthday. It was a kind of gift for him
Oh
because
wow.
she wrote a lot of things about the war in Chechnya, about Russian war crimes, and I would say it's a very big mistake in the U.S. foreign policy when U.S. politicians think that it's possible to negotiate. If you remember, uh, there was conflict in Georgia in 2008, and when Russia attacked Georgia, and there was such a policy forcing Georgia to the peace. And 6 years later, Putin attacked Ukraine in 2014
Mm-hmm.
because there was no any normal reaction on such actions of Russia. So they understood, okay, if we attack Georgia and nothing happens, we can continue and attack Ukraine. And
Now, talking about that, about the attack, so in 2014, you know, that's when we had a lot of different transitions going on here in America. And I mean, this is just my opinion, and it just comes to think that he had all this time to do something about it, but he chose that point in time in history. Do you think it's because he chose that point in time in history because basically America looked weak to where he didn't think that America was going to fight back?
not only because that uh, Putin told once that the collapse of Soviet Union it's the biggest geopolitical catastrophe of 20th century, and he has this very strong Soviet mentality. He wants to resurrect the Soviet Empire, and uh, they have very Russians have very, let's say, interesting approach to history. Uh, in the same trench can be, for example, adherents of such historical period like as Russian Empire and adherents of the period of Soviet Union. But if we read history, we know that Soviet Union, like Soviets, Bolsheviks, they destroyed Russian
Mhm.
Empire. So it's very contradicting opinions, but the Russians can combine this worldview.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of talk too that back during the Cold War days, that one of the reasons when after Putin became into power, that I mean, this is what I've learned through history, is that there's contradiction when it comes to the fact of that the American or the NATO sit there and basically not really wrote it down in paper, but the way that Gorbachev and everybody else understood it on the Russian front was that NATO would not move anywhere forward, and start collecting all these countries under NATO power that were along the Russian border. And I think he still believes that the same thing as like Gorbachev did, that NATO promised that we wouldn't go any further. And I don't know, like I said, that's just kind of way I get out of it.
It's very interesting case because Putin told we attacked Ukraine, otherwise Ukraine would have joined NATO. But what Putin achieved attacking Ukraine? Sweden and Finland joined NATO. So it's even closer to Russian border than Ukraine. And from Finland, you can send rockets directly to Moscow. But Putin doesn't care about joining Finland to NATO. It's okay for him. Main idea that Russians. I would also add one important thing. When Europe experienced Nazism, Europe experienced Nazism, but never experienced communism like Ukraine and, for example, Baltic countries. And the problem is that if there was denazification in Germany, there was no such policy in Russia. So for Russians, it's okay to justify Soviet war crimes like Great Famine in 1932, 1933 in Ukraine. It's okay for them to say about restoring historical justice, and even you can compare narratives about the end of Second World War. For example, in Europe and the United States, we say never again. If we talk about Russia, Russians say we can repeat. Can you see the difference between approaches? So, for example, I cannot imagine if some German chancellor says that the downfall of Nazi Germany and Third Reich is the biggest geopolitical catastrophe of 20th century. But in Russia, it's possible. That's the difference.
So, I mean, from what you see down there, do you see that, because we've heard a lot of talk on mainstream and internet about how all these different countries like NATO and everything else, have you seen any actual help from all these countries that have said that they've dedicated to help?
NATO, Europe, and the United States, they do not understand how strong the war has changed, because our war combines like tactics of First World War, Second World War, and huge, huge, huge level of using technology. For example, FPV drones. It's something new. Radio electronic warfare, and for example, you can go to the trenches to kill Russians, but in the same time, you face not only with Russians like your enemy who you can see, but every assault which we experienced is strongly supported with mortar fire and very popular tactics in Ukraine that, for example, simple Chinese drone DJI Mavic flies up on your head and just throw grenades, and it helps to destroy all the groups, small groups. For example, we use it, Russians use it, and it's completely new experience. For example, I talked to one former US veteran, and he told me, Squire, I am afraid that Russia will teach drug cartels soon to use FPV drones against US border patrol.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
actually,
I assume that it can happen.
It's already happening, actually.
I was going to say, I think there's a lot of chatter about that already happening down here.
Yeah.
So, because I mean, we do have, what Gia's introduced me to with talking about the cartels and stuff, that we do have a lot of Russian
Mm-hmm.
influence in Mexico and along the southern borders.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
It lasts from Soviet times. Also, very interesting fact that in Europe, Russia invests lots of money in far right and right populist parties. But if we talk about Latin America, Russia has always been sponsoring left-wing radical movements.
Mm-hmm.
For example, FARC, uh, Sendero Luminoso, if I pronounce it correctly, and other radical groups.
yeah. Yeah, that's what's, I mean, we've always had, I mean, even back during, before like Vietnam and everything, we've had Russian influence, coming closer and closer to the borders, because and we see it today. I mean, even today, Russia flies their planes next to
Mm-hmm.
the Canadian border or the Alaskan border of the United States and everything else, just to tease and just to
Yeah, see how far
antagonize.
they can get.
Yeah.
Test the waters.
Because we're constantly
No,
getting reports of their bombers and everything else
Mm-hmm.
and their fighters coming close to internet, to our airspace, and but
they
all it,
check how nature reacts
yeah,
because when the Cold War ended, as Francis Fukuyama thought that it will be the end of the history, so there will be a victory of democracy, and the idea that it's better to cooperate than fight will win. That it's possible to democratize Russia and former Soviet republics. But if the world has changed after the Second World War, after Cold War, Russia hasn't changed uh, because, as I told before, the logic the same. We lost Cold War. We should restore historical justice. That's the logic.
yeah, yeah, and I think there's a lot of outside influences too. Because I mean, even talking about the Cold War, once I learned more, the truth about that, the wall in Berlin actually wasn't even supposed to fall. It was an accidental. It was an accidental, but was it accidental? It's one of the things. It's like I think there's so much influence in outside forces. I mean, a lot of them, CIA, if you want to call it, or all these other spook organizations. But I mean, it's just like when I hear people, it's just like Russia started this war. It's just like after what I know about history about how the U.S. has been implemented into so many things and creating so many conflicts, it makes you kind of wonder that did Russia actually start this, or was it an instigation between, you know, outside forces playing to try to get it to start? Because, like I said, I mean, and the current administration, like I said, you go back when this all started back in the current administration, America was classified as weak. And I think, you know, Putin played on that. And with all the leaked information that we found out about what was happening with our embassy or our people in Ukraine that were trying to put people into place over there, which we do quite often in other countries. That's what I'm saying. I think, I mean, I'm not going to say that we didn't have something to do with the starting of it. Cause like I said, I mean, we started Vietnam. We basically There's rumors saying we even, started it to the point to where we got into World War II, so there's always, because war's money. So it's like the more war, the more money they make.
I wouldn't say that it's about some other parts of. It's not about some other parts of conflict. Mm, Russia, how to explain? As I already said, it's about worldview, and it's it lasts all our history because uh, uh, I wa- I watched one interview once when two Russian propagandists were talking, and they said we should capture Ukraine because we will get Ukrainians with military experience in order to enlist them to our army to attack NATO. I even will try to find this conversation and send to Gia. She will send it to you, or
Okay.
I will send personally. Uh, the idea is to restore the Soviet Union. That is why Putin always talks about it. Russia is not ready to accept Ukraine as independent and separate state because all this narrative that all this narrative about Russian-Ukrainian brotherhood is false. Russia can only accept Ukraine if we refuse from our language, from our point of view on history, when we start to build monuments to all these red butchers who killed lots of Ukrainians in concentration camps during Great Famine or Red Terror. That is the Ukraine which Russia is ready to accept. If we talk that we don't like Soviet army mm, because lots of Ukrainians died in Second World War in so-called this. I don't know if you have this word, so called meat assaults when you just send people to direct fire of the enemy.
Oh, okay.
That's what Russia continues to use in Ukraine. The only one, like Donald Trump say, card of Russia is huge number of population. So they don't care about human life, as our former the chief of our armed forces, Valery Zaluzhny, told that 8,000 8,000 when 8,000 people died in Afghanistan, it forced the Soviet Union to stop intervention in Afghanistan. In Ukraine, Russian lost more than 8,000, but it didn't stop the war. And the biggest problem in with such approach that European and some US politicians they think if they stop to send Ukrainian weapons, it will lead to decreasing the escalation of the conflict. But it's not true. When that is why Russia requires one of the conditions of Russia. Okay, we are ready for ceasefire, but the United States should not supply Ukraine data, weaponry, and Europe as well, because they know that when we have weapons, we can destroy them. We can destroy them. Maybe you read about last operation of Ukraine's security service, the net, when when we destroyed lots of Russian aircrafts, like 41
Oh, yeah.
aircraft. It was very cheap operation if we compare how much money we should spend on the war. But it was very effective strike, and it shows that it's possible to fight with Russia. It's possible because the only one advantage which Russia has its huge number of population. So they can send. I remember even 1 hour operation when like we destroyed 10 Russians and 10 more are coming. Destroy the next 10, 10 more are coming, and how can it end? Like you will be out of ammunition or you will be wounded. So the only one
Mhm.
option is to escape from this position in order to survive because they can send more and more.
Yeah, and talking about what you were talking about, that air base strike, because like I said, we were seeing there's a lot of misinformation that's being produced about that too, because they're saying that some of the Russian planes didn't even have engines. They weren't. It was a dead Air Force base. That there wasn't any. They weren't capable of doing anything. So I mean, that's like I said, that's the propaganda that we see over here.
Mhm.
You know, if it would have been a dead, if it would be a dead base, Russians wouldn't have said that. Okay, we our answer will be very strong. We will destroy Kiev. What Russian can do is destroy hospitals, just to strike during the religious holidays in the peaceful cities, like it was in Sumy. I'm here now, and
Mhm.
I can even send you picture. I made a picture from what happened to this building after this Russian airstrike. That's what Russian can do. If you remember Mariupol, it was like more than 80 days of defense, and Russians could not fight with Ukrainian army like in equal battle, like Ukrainian soldiers against Russian soldiers. So they just destroyed this city. They totally destroyed it. Well, that is what they do all the time. If they cannot fight with our troops, they just destroy city with artillery, bombs, etc. It was in Lysychansk, it was in Mariupol, it was in Severodonetsk, it was in Marinka. I can continue like to name these cities or towns or villages which were destroyed. That's what they can do to fight with civilians, not with army.
So
Mhm.
there's one thing. I mean, I know this war's gone on for this is like the third year, going on the third year. I mean, have you seen any chances of it coming to an end soon?
Once again, please.
I said this war's been going on for 3 years now. Have you personally like seen or felt like there's any closeness to it ending?
Uh, it depends not only from us because we are really strongly dependent from the U.S. support from Europe, and we are really grateful to American people for all the assistance which we have been provided all this time. Gia also helped me lots of times to make fundraising to provide us with some specific equipment, and we know, as I told, we know that United States citizens they support Ukraine. They understand what it means to fight for freedom. But the end, I would say it's not very close because more and more people they are afraid to to be enlisted. They try to avoid army. Uh, the same thing I think was during Vietnam War in the United States. It's when people didn't want to be enlisted.
Hmm.
But there is strong need to make more pressure on Russia because Putin it's a kind of mafia boss who understand only strength. because when you show the weakness, it's a sign for him that he can continue to attack, to pressure on you. It's not about democracy, because all these democratic institutions, they do not work in Russia. For example, if we have like freedom of speech, we have some basic political freedoms and rights. It doesn't work. It doesn't work in Russia. For example, if you say that Second World War started in 1939, you will go to jail in Russia, because it destroys a very popular narrative that uh, uh, it was a justified war of Soviet Union. They use this date 1941, 1945, because uh, modern Russia tries to hide that Soviet Union and Nazi Germany attacked Poland together.
Yeah.
It's a problem for them.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a lot of deep dive, because that's some of the things you don't learn until actually get out on your own and start researching all this stuff, from college to, high school to college and stuff like that. So it's just like when I started researching a lot of this stuff in the last few years, it's like I was really amazed how much stuff I was lied to, basically, and
Mhm.
in my education upbringing about how this stuff happens. Just goes to show how propagandized the American people are.
Mhm.
Um, so I mean, I lost my train of thought there. um, so you told me at the beginning you're a combat medic.
Yes.
Is that? I mean, was you in the military prior to all this, or is this something that you started when everything started happening?
When I joined Special Operation Forces, my commanders mm, they want attention on that I'm very calm, and I really do not afraid a blood, because and open wounds. It was evident during the trainings, and they also could see that it was very easy to me to learn all the March and TCCC algorithm, and I know it, and I also can teach other people, because it was easy for me to remember it and to do it effectively. And when I had my first casualty, my body's also told that it's very strange for us, but you are completely calm when you work. You are not afraid of blood and open wounds. You know how to communicate with casualty in order to prevent the panic, and that is really what I like, because I really like this feeling that there is a person who returned to a family alive thanks to me.
No, I mean that's amazing, because, like I said, I think combat medics. I think they yes, the soldiers see a lot of like the actual conflict, but combat medics see all the aftermath. They see everything that happens after the shots are fired and everything else. I mean, if you can, I mean, is there anything in your time doing this? Is there anything that's one time in? See if I can say this right. There's anything in your history of doing this that stands out, like a time, like with a soldier or anything else that made you say, "I'm where I need to be."
Mm, uh, my family, like we are all militaries. My father, my brother, my mom. It's a kind of
Oh,
our
okay.
family tradition. So my father, he is a colonel of National Guard, and when the war had started, He told me, "Come to my unit. You will get a rank. You will be far away from war." But I told him I don't want. I'm going to Kiev right now. And then after Kiev, I told him I'm going to join Special Operation Forces. He was very afraid because my
I
father
can
he's an
imagine.
engineer, military engineer, and he knows from experience what the war is about. But it was my decision, and I wouldn't say that I have something. I have nothing to. I have nothing to regret. I know that I'm in the right place, and I do what I need to save human lives.
No, I mean, that's great. Like I said, we need people like you said, calm and collected and everything else, and being able to keep down the panic. So, I mean, that is awesome that you can do that, because a lot of people can't, even in the medic field. Because even
Yeah.
on civilian medic fields, I see the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
But, um,
Also, maybe it will be useful for some combat medics which who listen to us. I have a kind of golden rule. When I see some very big and dangerous wound, I do not allow other team members, and I do not allow it to myself, to say, "Oh my God, you have so big and dangerous wound." If a casualty asks me what happened, will I survive? I say, I've seen worse wounds. Everything is going to be okay. It's a kind of psychological work with a casualty because it allows me to prevent panic.
yeah. Now, have you seen any of the casualties that you've treated and stuff like that? Has there anybody that just sit there and said, "I'm done," and they quit and then move on after they've gotten injured, or are they like, "Okay, let's
Yes,
get back out there"?
my last casualty. He was very afraid. Um, uh, Old man, like 52 or 53 years old, and he was really in panic. Like all the time, he was repeating, "It hurts, it hurts." Uh, Guys, I think it's the end. I will die here. And I told him, "Mm, I am not working. I don't. I'm not working trying to save your life in order to let you die here. I promise you that in the evening you will be in hospital." And I did it. It took
Very
us like 70 hours to stabilize him, to
wow.
control him, and then carry him to the point of evacuation. But he, fortunately, he is already in hospital and he is alive. He will meet with his family, and I'm
Wow.
really happy about this.
Yeah, that's a very good job. Yeah, that's why I'm saying it's just like I couldn't imagine, you know, being on the front line, because I mean, this is basically. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, the war in Ukraine and everything else is basically like we went, some of our families and stuff like that went through during Vietnam, into, because it took me a while when all this started, when I first started getting involved and listening to it and everything else, because all I had was the internet. So it's just like, I started doing my own research and then started talking to people. I mean, that's actually how me and Gia met, was over a conversation, kind of like a disagreement on Twitter, because I
Yeah.
wasn't educated, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just like, and then we've been, talking almost nonstop since, February. So it's like, and and she's educated me a lot about her time over there, when when she spent time over there, and about some of the things, and has introduced me to, like you, and to Long T and everybody else that's helped me get a better understanding. So when I look at the internet now and I see all this stuff about all this propaganda that gets poured into it, that it's just like, it's, yes, you can support and everything else by everybody like puts their Ukrainian flags up in their bio and everything else, but the
I
comments
have
and
the
stuff,
flag here, by the way.
I seen
I
that.
have the flag behind me since everybody's upset about foreign flags, but I figured I put it, behind me just to be supportive of everybody that's serving out there, including you and everybody else out there, Long T, and yeah, both Ukrainian and even volunteers. There's a lot of U.S. volunteers out there too.
Yes, at the beginning, U.S. citizens, it was probably the biggest group which I met if we talk about foreign volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think now,
Yeah.
I understand. So are you actually you're part of the Ukrainian army? You're not part of these individual militia, I guess I would basically be calling militia groups here, but the independent army groups. So you actually are part of the Ukrainian army.
Yes, I am a member of 6th Special Purpose Regiment Rangers.
Okay.
It's an attempt to repeat like United States experience with Army Rangers.
Okay.
And I would say it's a very good idea. Of course, there are some obstacles as always, mm, but it is very effective because we have like assault companies, we have drone companies, mortar companies, uh, mechanized companies as well, and when everything works together, it gives very good results.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to kind of it's not really a question. It's more of I recall you wanted to you know somehow speak to members of Congress and Senate. I know that's not been a possibility yet, but if you could and they were listening, or if some of them were to listen, what would you say to them? What is the support you guys need the most right now in Ukraine? Not just your unit specifically, but in general, to defeat Russia and in essence to have this war come to an end without costing more
Uh,
Ukrainian lives.
uh, what I would say is that, of course, it's good mm, when we are given a lot of humanitarian aid, but the problem is that if we get more weapons, there is less need to give us humanitarian aid. For example, when Russia started to attack our critical infrastructure, Europe sent us generators, but they do not understand that that giving us weapons to protect our critical infrastructure means that we will not need generators in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And as about Congress, uh, you know, American politicians, they should not treat Putin as an equal partner. It's not equal partner. It's a terrorist. For example, can you imagine that someone says, uh, it's not good that you don't like Osama bin Laden. You should negotiate. Maybe he had reasons to organize 9/11. It doesn't work like this.
Mm-hmm.
Putin is a terrorist. I told Rebel before we started about a book written by former Russian security service agent Alexander Litvinenko. It's called "Blowing Up Russia: Terror from Within." This guy he escaped to London and he published a book with documents and interrogations of witnesses and
Mm-hmm.
proved that all these terrorist attacks in 90s were organized by Russian Federal Security Service, not by Chechen. But it allowed these terrorist attacks allowed Russia to justify war crimes in Chechnya. And if we look at narratives about, for example, we can repeat, like if we talk about Second World War, or I would say also that all the Russian propaganda before Trump came to power was based that the United States is the biggest enemy of the Russia. So they hate Russia. They, for example, when there are these parades during the Victory Day, 9th of May, they, for example, can put these artificial rockets on their cars and wrote there for Washington. I can send you lots of picture of it. All the Russian propaganda from the very beginning of conflict since 2014 was built on the narrative that Ukraine is a puppet of the United States, and Ukraine is a weapon which the United States has been using to destroy Russia. All this Russian propaganda has been based on this narrative. And United States politicians, they should not treat Putin as an equal partner. They should treat him like mafia boss because all the decisions are made in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And giving Ukraine weaponry means that we can protect not only us, we can protect Europe because when if Russia destroys Ukraine, Europe will be the next, and it's better to send us weapon and some financial support than send American soldiers to fight in Europe, because
Mm-hmm.
it will be very hard to explain to all the U.S. citizens why their son, daughter, husband, or wife should go to the war which is not at the territory of the United States. That's
Yeah.
the reason why the United States should support Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And if we talk about, as you know, Budapest memorandum, we were promised. That is why I did not, and I'm not going to agree with this narrative of Trump that you should pay us debt for help. It was a promise that if we give our nuclear weapon,
Mm-hmm.
United States, Great Britain, and Russia, which broke this agreement, will protect us. And if the United States refuse to help us, it will create United States um, a reputation of not reliable partner, and Europe, other United States allies, they will think about their
Mm-hmm.
own, for example, nuclear weapon. They will just start their programs because why should they be under American nuclear umbrella, let's say, if they uh, cannot be sure that United States will help them when
Mm-hmm.
when they will need it? That's the biggest threat for American reputation and as a leader of free world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for answering that.
I mean, talking about like the U.S. involvement, and I do agree with that. I think I mean, the way you guys are passionate, the way Ukrainians are passionate and everything else, and I've seen that through a lot of documentaries, and not just Hollywood documentaries, but actually documentaries that I found
Mm-hmm.
online and stuff like that. I do believe it's just like now that the more financial and military, weaponry kind of support is more beneficial to you all than sending soldiers in there, considering, there's a lot of already soldiers on the ground, and
Mm-hmm.
considering what is how long you guys have pushed back on this in the last 3 years. I mean, I don't think sending more people down would help anything. But talking about that, I mean,
No,
do you believe in like this new deal that was signed in April? I mean, do you think that's actually going to benefit you
It doesn't
guys?
work.
It doesn't work.
Doesn't work. What kind of deal do you mean? Oh,
That
like this
the
ceasefire?
the no the what the U.S. and what Zelensky and Trump finally sat down and signed in April, the mineral deal that we're supposed to send, you know, some
Mm,
type of support to you all.
yes, I think it will have influence even for Trump voters that they can get something from Ukraine. That it is a kind of win-win partnership. And I can explain also one more thing that it's really a win-win partnership because we are on the front line and we are first state which get all this new experience. We can share it. We can teach lots of U.S. soldiers how to work according to new reality of the war because we have huge experience of FPV drones. We have completely new experience of combat medicine, for example. I learned a lot how to save, for example, arm or leg for a person, how to change tourniquets, how to uh, evaluate every casualty in order to make his life easier after the war. For example, if
Mhm.
if we apply tourniquet, for example, before Ukrainian war, it was not allowed to put off tourniquet. Now we are doing it. So
Hmm.
so-called conversion of a tourniquet because we evaluate the wound and
Mhm.
we try to understand if there is need to apply tourniquet. And it makes life of casualties much easier after the war. It's
Mhm.
completely new experience based on our war. Uh, Radio electronic warfare as well. We can offer a lot of things uh, and share our experience. And all the intelligence data, of course, Ukrainian government has been sharing with United States since the very beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So tell me a little bit about. I mean, is there anything that you guys have started learning differently that works faster and more effective than what like previous combat medics and stuff like that have done?
You know, it's always very hard to follow March algorithm because there is so high intensity uh, uh, of a battle that usually you have no time to follow everything you should.
Mhm.
Uh, Sometimes you should work even in red area, not yellow zone. For example, I worked once in red zone, but it's prohibited according to the March algorithm. But I saved the guy because it's very high intensity. For example, you can work with casualty. There is mortar shelling. There are FPV drones, and there are Mavics which throw grenades near you. And you should also uh, try to avoid some landmines in the same time.
Mhm.
And we know how to survive in these conditions. It's hard, but Ukraine shows it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you guys have definitely. I mean, I hate to say it, but definitely impressive the way fought back. You guys are fighting back one of one of the superpowers of the world, and it's really amazing to see. That goes a lot with, I think, like once I started learning about Ukraine and about their citizens and stuff like that. It's just about how, like you said in the beginning, their determination, their love of country, and everything else. It's
Mhm.
Because we know what expects us if Russia wins.
Mhm.
We could see what happened to Mariupol. We could see Russian atrocities in Bucha, and I would add one more thing. We don't want it to happen in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one more thing,
Mhm.
we are not only fighting with superpower states, we are probably the first state which started intervention at the territory of nuclear state. I mean, Kursk operation.
Yeah, because I mean, you guys, when the wall fell and everything else, Ukrainian was what, the third or fourth nuclear powered country in the world. But supposedly all of those were given back to Russia for destroyed, which I don't think they actually were. I think they're still holding on to them. But
Yeah.
um,
I mean, more than likely.
so I mean, when it comes down to like the fighting with the technology that you've seen, I mean, does Russia have the same technological advances that Ukraine does? You know, or do you think that's the reason why you guys have stood your ground so hard because you have the better tech?
Uh, it's about the difference, I would say, in weight categories, because Russia is really good in producing drones. For example, if we at the beginning we were producing these drones in at homes, for example, Russia can produce it on the factories, and
Mm,
they have lots of drones. Not only Iranian Shaheds, but the drones which are made in Russia. And when you, for example, go out from the trench, you can hear all the sounds of drones all the time, like bees. For example, I experienced such thing that there is like a field, like 400 meters of open area, and one drone is always patrolling this area. And if there is very low battery, this drone returns to operator, and the next drone is coming, and they can control it like all the day and all the night. They have very high amount of drones, and most of them are being produced on Russian factories.
Hmm.
So in this sense, Russia has very huge advantage, and uh, in democratic states we should make everything public, like to look on public opinion, what people think, if they are going to vote for me when I will do it. In Russia, it doesn't work like this. It's dictatorship, so Putin says, everyone does. If
mm,
it, it's a kind of cartel management, plata o plomo.
yeah. So I mean, like talking with that, I mean, so Zelensky, I mean, I know there's a lot of rhetoric and a lot of everything else about him, you know, because of where he came from and how he got his start. And I mean, do you see the major support from Zelensky like is produced on on the social media and what we're seeing over here? Is there that much support from Zelensky towards the soldiers?
Of course, he is criticized, but what I can say from my experience, I didn't like Zelensky before 2022, and I was criticizing him as well. But what I can say that he he did really a lot of things, and he all the time he tries to get some help. He is not afraid to meet with soldiers personally, even on the front line. Uh, I always try to look not on like propaganda of every political party, but what the person who became president does. And if I
Hmm.
compare with previous President Poroshenko, I would say that it's much better than it was, because mm, all the time it was a policy of negotiating with Russia. Like we should sign this Minsk agreement because there is no other way except diplomatic way to end this conflict. But Zelensky started to talk with all world leaders to negotiate to in order to get
Mhm.
more weapons, more support. I would say that he is a very great leader.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
Maybe someone will not agree with me, but that's my opinion.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, that's yeah, I get disagreed on a lot. So I mean, that's one thing I've learned to have I guess a hard shell about. It's just like, it's my opinion. You can agree with me or not. That's your choice.
Because Russia tries
Yeah.
to show Zelensky as a dictator because not so long ago there were elections of Russian president and Putin won once again. In he's a president of Russia like for 23 years, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yeah,
Russia has been using this as an argument. Can you see? We you say that we are dictatorship, but we have free elections, and Ukraine does not. But Ukraine doesn't have elections because we have martial law right now, and
Mhm.
it's very hard to provide uh, really fair elections when Russia strikes our country with rockets. It's
yeah,
impossible. And how to provide the right to vote for all those soldiers who are in trenches for all this time? It's also impossible. That is why there is no elections.
Yeah.
I mean, that would happen here too. I mean, that's happened in the past. Like we've gone into conflict during an election year. I mean, that's the reason why a lot of the times they try to start a conflict or do a conflict is so that they can keep the current president in power.
Mhm.
Um, because that's one thing is it's just like an unwritten rule. They don't want to get rid of a sitting president here in the United States if there's a conflict or a war going on because they don't want
Mhm.
they don't want the ability to change it. We don't necessarily go into martial law. We don't necessarily do that, but it's like in a background sense that we don't switch political, heads of the country during a major conflict. I mean, so, but no, I mean, so I mean, I mean, I totally understand, not having elections right now because Ukraine and Russia are they're head to head with this. Putting in somebody else could really either, I mean, it could possibly even topple it to where with the uncertainty of actually who you could trust down there to be a political leader, um,
Mhm.
could actually topple it to on Russia's favor. So yeah, I mean, I'm totally for the way everything's happening down there now about not having elections because I
Yes,
think what I've seen, I think he's actually after I got rid of all the stigma that was being put out there about him. Um, yeah, there's a lot of things, like I said, with Trump, there's a lot of things I don't agree with. I mean, there's some things about that I've seen, that Zelensky's done I don't agree with. But again, like you said, that's, my opinion. And I'm definitely not a political expert. So, but um, yeah, I was going through it. You kept talking about this March algorithm, and I was kind of curious. So I looked it up to see what it was. I mean, it's kind of interesting how that's set up, so
The what algorithm? Sorry, I didn't catch that one.
the March algorithm,
Hmm.
it's the way they um, triage their trauma.
Oh, okay.
You got like the
yes,
unstaged mass hemorrhaging, A
it's
stands
based
for airway.
it's
Hmm.
based on preventing three the most popular reasons of death, like massive bleeding, breathing, and hypothermia.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So because from the bleeding, people die like for
Mhm.
3 minutes. Like so, that is why bleeding is first. You
Mhm.
should prevent.
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, a lot of our because that at one time or another, I was wanting to be, an EMT, which is basically a civilian medic here. But
Take a course, by the way. I mean, I took one. Not that I remember everything. I'd probably have to take
yeah,
like a refresher, but it covers the basics. It's not gonna make you an expert, and then you have to like keep practicing, on top of that. So unless you practice, with people, with a group, or unless you'd have the opportunity to practice like on a real injured person, you're really not putting it to use. In other words.
yeah,
Yes, and one more thing that it's a little bit different. There are different wounds. For example, there is not so much gun wounds, but more. I all like my combat medic career.
Mm-hmm.
I I should deal like with shrapnel wounds mostly because of drones, because of artillery.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had gun wounds, like I think twice. The rest of wounds which I worked with, it was mostly from shrapnel, and of course barotrauma. Like when something explodes very close to you, it affects on your head. It start you it start you have very strong headache. Like I had it twice.
mm,
Yeah, I was going to ask you, isn't that some of the trauma that you had or injury that you had, and that your unit was like attacked by Russia before?
Yes, I had barotrauma twice because of mortar shelling,
Mm-hmm.
and once
Mm-hmm.
uh, I was hit with shrapnel in my leg, but
Mm-hmm.
fortunately it did not penetrate my shoes.
Hmm.
wow.
Sorry, I'm like drinking my coffee over here because I didn't sleep enough, so I have to stay awake on top of like dealing with the heat and stuff. But yeah, I wanted to ask you like real quick. I know you guys have like survived different injuries, attacks, different missions. You kind of face that anyway while being at the front. But have you lost any members like of your unit or other previous units? Has that happened before, or is it just injuries that you treat or that you've treated?
Uh, During my last tour, I lost only one member of my team for half a year. Only like in the battalion, of course, there were human losses, but my personal experience, I from my combat medic uh, practice, for all my combat medic practice, I lost only one guy because there were so big wounds that it was impossible to do something.
Yeah. And I know, this wasn't part of like my questions or anything, but in general, I know that Ukraine is kind of working on getting like mental health, support out there to the soldiers, veterans, etc. So it's kind of a new thing. But do you guys get any support for that at all, or is it just do they just leave it up to you? Like, do units, provide any of that, or is there any resources when you take a break? For example, when you go to Kiev to kind of, talk to a therapist. I know there's some resources I've heard about, and I've shared it before. I just kind of stopped sharing it, because I don't know how many people from Ukraine actually follow me, even though I did, reports and what's out there myself. But there are some resources where you can do like telehealth, for example, like organizations. I think it's the UK and some other countries that provide that, but sometimes it helps to have like that kind of support in person even when you're taking a break. So is there something that helps you deal with that, with the aftermath of being in combat, like seeing death, injuries, and whatnot as a medic?
Yes, like after every mission and after every tour, we talk with psychologists. They evaluate our mental health. We write some tests. They talk to us. If there are some very, let's say, sharp reaction on that stress, they can send a person and his family, for example, even to have a break abroad. I remember when some of our guys were sent to Spain together with families. So, of course, there is a lot of things to improve because Ukrainian psychologists they do not understand. They do not fully understand what they are dealing with, what people should see every day at war. But they learn. They try to use some new approaches
Yeah.
because it's not enough only to talk. It's about understanding what every single soldier has experienced during his tour.
Hmm.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
For
good you have
example,
that
my
that support.
for example, my method to fight with PTSD consequences it's to write some poetry, to read books, and I'm also BJJ practitioner. I have blue belt.
Hmm.
Mm.
Oh wow.
Trainings help a lot. For example, there is such organization TMS in Ukraine. It's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu organization. Was founded by uh, a volunteer from Belarus who lost a leg at the war,
Hmm.
and he decided to create a project which uses Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a kind of rehabilitation and a method to fight with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it's a really good idea. A lot of veterans they take a part in competitions in training, even if they lost leg, for example, or arm, they
Hmm.
fight, they win this election, and it's really good practice to show that you are not forgotten, that people
Hmm.
really appreciate what you did for this country.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I don't. I want to keep you on here too much longer, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to talk about?
We can choose some some topics, whatever you want. We can talk about literature, about about war, about some history.
I mean,
For example, I'm great fan of uh, American writer Chuck Palahniuk. Like I read like Fight Club twice and other books as well. It's like one of my favorite books.
so you said something about that you write poetry and stuff like that. Is that? I mean, I noticed that there's a lot of people that I've talked to, even like in DMs and stuff like that. That's one of the things that they do is
Hmm.
poetry seems to be like the number one relaxation technique and
Hmm.
things like that. I mean,
Yes,
Yeah.
because if you have some negative emotions, uh, it helps to direct these emotions in some other source. For example, you do not behave aggressively because you write all the emotions in the poetry, what you feel, what you don't like, and it's also one of the methods how to motivate people to continue to fight. Because I am trying to avoid so these depressive motives in my poetry. Like I try always to motivate people to show that of course it's hard. We lost the best representatives of our nation, but
Hmm.
freedom is worth of it. We should continue to fight. That is one of my main narratives in the poetry, and I also like to use some historical or some comparisons from literature in my poetry, and it's a kind of art therapy, I would say.
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, like music, writing, journaling. It doesn't necessarily have to be poetry because I used to write poetry too, and then I kind of stopped. But it does have some kind of an element, like an additional element beyond just journaling or writing what your day was. Or let's say there's a lot of apps out there that help you with multitasking, right? So it kind of makes you focus on what do I need to do, but that can be stressful because it's just a list of here's my tasks that I have to do, and I do those daily, and it just stresses me out to do that. But if I focus on like journaling my thoughts or my goals, it's like different because it helps you focus not on what you haven't done yet or accomplished, but more along the lines of like an internal it's almost like an internal healing, and it helps you focus on like future goals, dreams, whatever. And I think that does help people keep going, if they're in a war zone, because it helps you focus on that rather than the destruction around you or death around you, or like the airstrikes, the daily air raid alerts and stuff like that. So it gives people hope, in other words. And same thing can be said of music, of painting, art, different kinds of art.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very useful because it helps to change the focus from war on
Yeah.
something beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing is it's like with Long T, that's one thing she always sit there and said is it's like she always, when she had down, all she had to do was like look at the scenery during the sunrise or anything like that, and it changed her entire mood and stuff like that. So
Yeah, and she does poetry too. I think she's like an author, published author too. So that helps a lot of people, and some people just use it, to write it for themselves, and other people choose to publish it for others to read, and that actually inspires other people when you choose to
Yes,
publish.
yes, it inspires other people, and
Hmm.
I also became a member of Ukrainian Forum of Military Writers in order to show my
Hmm.
poetry to other people.
oh wow.
That's cool.
So do you keep like a journal or something like that, or do you journal a lot of things with your experience?
Yes, I try to write something. It's about more about some my thoughts about things which are going on. Uh, Before the poetry, I was writing different articles connected with such topics as international relations, US EU policy,
Hmm.
because I studied international relations at the university, and
Oh, okay.
this is a topic which continues to be interesting for me. I try to follow all the news, to read, to compare and analyze it.
Now, do you get to see a lot of the news like from the United States down there? I mean, do you still see all of that, or most part, or is it filtered through?
Yes, quite a lot, quite high number of Ukrainian media write about current political situation in the United States, about negotiation process, what Trump published in X.
I mean, do you guys get any of the American channels down there, like any of the American news channels and stuff like that, or has that all
Uh,
been kind of blocked?
Usually, Ukraine, no, it's not blocked. If people can read English, a lot of my close friends they read, for example, the Atlantic, foreign policy. Uh, we even made some translations of interesting articles, which explains some steps made by before Biden, now Trump administration.
So, I mean, do you think like with the way that the war has been propagandized so much here in the United States through our social media and through our mainstream media, do you think
Oh,
there's a
it's
lot of do you think there's a way to actually, like with short broad with small places like us and stuff like that that try to get the real truth out?
Hmm.
Do you
uh,
actually ever see that the truth is actually going to come out to where it will kind of like flood out the propaganda, or is what we're seeing in the propaganda going to be like written in history?
Yes, Russians invest a lot of money in propaganda. The main target is of propaganda is to block your critical thinking. Like
Mhm.
you can see all these clickbait titles in order to provoke your emotional reaction, and that's the first thing you should pay attention, because when I see some articles with very scary title, I I always stop myself and say, okay, let's check this new in some other sources if it's true.
Yeah, it's good.
Because
Fair. Yeah.
there is a joke when Russian attacked Georgia, and there were articles in United States media. Russian attacked Georgia. Some people reacted so emotionally that they thought that Russia attacked the state of Georgia.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I did
Yeah.
see some people talk about that.
Mhm.
But
That's why it's important to know geography.
yeah,
Basic
yeah, a
basics.
like
lot of it comes
like
down to education.
Gia probably knows about such village in Ukraine which is called New York, and
Oh yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
yes, and Russians captured New York, for example. It can also work as a propaganda.
I can see that. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually a village in the Ukraine called New York.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's not spelled the same way, but it's pronounced the same way, so it can confuse a lot of people. And if media, don't report the differences, it's once again one of those stories that can get a lot of people like clicking, and then before you know it, it's trending, and then it's propaganda, and then everybody has their own opinion on it, and it's chaos. And that's how the media works. And it's starting to get annoying, to me every day, like having to see both left and right do the same thing, like constantly, almost with every single issue, not just, Ukraine Russia war, but it seems to be that way. And it gets tiring after a while,
Well, I mean, there was
more
a
work for us having to like research and take an extra 5, 10, 15 minutes to see if one story is actually reported correctly or not.
yeah. I mean, there was a famous speech Obama did at Stanford. President Obama did, sitting there basically saying, and like I said, even when I started researching that speech, I started researching Obama more. Obama's not as bad as everybody said he was. I mean, he did literally try to do a lot of good things for the country
Hmm.
and for the geopolitical side of things. Yes, there was a lot of selfish things that he did, but the famous speech that he did at Stanford, it was on communication and miscommunicate or misinformation. And he basically said the one way to win a war or to win any war is to flood, the town square, which would be like our social media and everything else, with
Hmm.
as much information as you possibly could, to where it
Yeah.
would
uh,
distract so many people to not be,
Mm.
it would divide everybody. And that's what it's done.
Yeah, true.
as former, no, not former, as famous American professor Samuel Huntington told, it's not only war of the countries, it's a world of world views.
Mm.
He wrote it about in his book The Clash of Civilizations. It's a fight between like free world and totalitarian world of Russia, which Russia tries to impose so-called ideology of Russian world. So it's not only about territories, but it's about hearts and minds of people.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Like I said, after I read that one there, that's a real that set me on a whole different aspect of looking at different, people's how people talked, how people communicated. The echo chambers that you see on social media is just crazy. I mean, me and Gia were talking about this the other night about how much so many people are repeating themselves constantly to try to, and repetition is it. The more
Hmm.
times you repeat something, the more that somebody's going to believe it. So, but no,
That's
go ahead.
true.
The lie repeated 100 times becomes true.
Yeah.
in some
Mm-hmm.
for some people. That is why Russia, for example, at the occupied territories, they try to educate our people, their history, their understanding of history, in order to make enemies. And there are already both such practice in Ukraine when, for example, our soldiers capture a guy and talk to him, and they understand when, for example, Donetsk and Lugansk were occupied. He was 10 years old, and it's a result of propaganda uh, that now this person, Ukrainian child, points a gun against his own citizens.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing. We see a lot of that right now. I mean, it's going on right now. There's been several posts circulating and several stories circulating about how Ukraine is, assassinating the deserters and stuff like that, Ukrainian soldiers. I mean, I don't know if that has gotten over to you, but that's some of the things that's been flowing through my timelines and stuff like that. And it's just like, but it's one of those things you can't believe. You've got to have that mindset. You've got to have the mindset that what you see is not what is really going on. So, and that's why I said that's why these
Yes,
conversations we have with different people that are on the ground is important to me because it helps me as a person understand this. So,
Yeah. Hmm.
but
Well,
um,
the same thing has been reported, I guess, reported on by different journalists and media about Russia doing that to their own soldiers, whether it's like torture or shooting at them, not rescuing them if they need to be rescued if they're like severely injured, basically just leaving them to die, because they're considered disposable. So they just send more people in, more soldiers to fight, and that's it. And if they refuse, they're either tortured or murdered.
yes, I can send you lots of videos published by Russian uh, Russian propaganda, some military channels in Telegram, for example. What they do with those soldiers who refused to go on the battlefield. They humiliate them, they torture them, they are not giving them food and water for a couple of days. And it's a method of such terror to make people to do the things which they probably wouldn't like to do.
Yeah.
Because Russian enlisted soldier, he has such choice. He goes to Ukraine to kill Ukrainians, or he will be killed by his own leadership.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
you know, yeah, I just, it's like I said, it's just crazy that, well, and it's all because these platforms monetize all this content now. So people are just putting crap out there just to,
Anything that'll trend, basically.
yeah.
Hmm.
And they don't even read a lot of it. I mean, I've had anytime I come across something that I know differently about that, I've talked to people, and it's just like, y'all don't even know what you're posting or why you're posting it other than the fact that it's creating an engagement for you. That's just plain and simple. And I think that's what's destroying the whole idea of social media being our new media here. It's just like it'll never happen. They've already destroyed that idea for me.
Yeah, true. Because it's like rewarding anything, whether it's fake, half true, half not true. Like the point, I think, is to get people, arguing and fighting, and it works. And influencers know that. They're
Yes,
like, "Oh, you're like posting, hateful stuff. Good. That'll get me paid." That's their thinking, right? Like the more the merrier.
there is very good essay written by French philosopher Jean Baudrillard, which is called "The War in the Gulf Has Not Taken Place." It explains a lot how social media affect combat operation and how they can change human minds and make people to do what they don't want to do.
Interesting.
Yeah. Um, so if there's one thing that you really want the American people to know that is like what we've something that is what you're seeing in the American media or anything else that is wrong about the war or about what's going on, what would it be that you would want somebody to set it straight? How would you want to set it straight? What you see down there, what is not really going on, what we're seeing over here?
Hmm, Let me think.
I
Mm,
mean, if you have several
I, w-
things, I mean,
First of all, I would like to repeat that we are really grateful for support which we get from the US citizens. I have lots of friends who really support us. Some of them I never met in real life, but they support me like for these 3 years. And of course, it's always good to have some doubts about what's going on in the world and in Ukraine, because of course. It's easy not to read. It's hard to read, to analyze, to compare all this flow of fake news and find the truth. But uh, one thing uh, people in America should know that we are defending our land. We have no other place to escape.
Mhm.
So that is what we should do. And Americans really know what freedom is about. And here in this point we have very similar worldviews and values.
Yeah. Yeah, the fight for freedom. I think that's something that people should at least understand, right? Like what people are fighting for: the right to live, the right to defend their house, their home, like basic stuff, liberty.
Yes.
yep. No, I totally agree.
Hmm.
Um, so do you have any plans that you plan on? Do you have any plans that you foresee after the war ends? I know there's not really an end in sight, but is there something that you want to do after the war ends?
Of course, I think I would like to finally continue my learning of Spanish, which was interrupted by war, to publish a book about these events and probably to do the things which will help to prevent more conflicts because
Hmm.
Uh, I I was civilian. I never had some combat experience. Never served in army before this war. But I would say that I really don't want any person in the world and any child in the world experience it what we are experiencing now. Never again.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's like I said, the more and more I get into understanding and listening to stories from, from y'all that live this on a daily basis, it's it's been an eye opener to me. And like I said, y'all have helped me understand that the BS that we see and everything else is about 90% fake anymore.
Hmm.
And I appreciate all the information that you've given to me and everything else and all your stories that I've heard. And I don't know, it's just crazy. It's crazy for me to grow for somebody like me growing up in a world to where we were Vietnam was just ending and everything else, and I really didn't understand what war was. And my first actual taste of war was 9/11, Desert Storm, and everything else. And conflict, and so seeing all this progression and regression, I guess you could say, because and political fighting. It just cracks me up. I can't wrap my head around it. It's just like, I guess because I think differently than most people.
Mhm. Yeah,
To wrap my head around exactly why this kind of stuff happens and where do we go from here.
exactly.
Yes, because every war has very big long-term consequences. It's not only about destroyed human lives, it's also about destroyed human souls.
um
That's true. So I wanted to ask, what's one way that people that are listening or that will listen, after the recording is done, what's one way that people can support, what you're doing to save lives and what your unit is doing to fight back, to fight Russia?
Like uh, I said, a lot of friends from the US support me, like send money. But for example, I don't like to deal with money. For me, it's okay even to get some combat medicine, some specific gear to become better, to improve my skills, to improve skills of my team, to to teach more people how to save human lives, and that would be the best thing, I think.
Okay, so would you say maybe people could help, like, instead of donating, then by advocating, for the government to fully support Ukraine to defeat Russia? I know you mentioned that earlier, like the weapons are more important. That way, there would be no more need.
Yes, weapons. If we have a lot of weapons which
Yeah.
allow us to bite Russia,
Hmm.
to make deep strikes, it means that we need less medicine to save human lives.
True.
Because, as I told in my example with generators,
Hmm.
uh, if we would have uh, mm, good air defense, we wouldn't have need generators to
True.
support our critical infrastructure.
Yeah, that's true.
is there an organization that you work with that you would like people to donate to if they could, like, for what they can support? Because I know I see a lot of these donations and stuff like that floating across social media and stuff like that for Ukraine. Is there a certain one
I would say
that would help your unit or something like that in general?
I would say that organization I really trust is of course Sons of Liberty because
Okay.
I met them at the very beginning of the war when Russians were near Kiev and
Hmm.
there was threat of capturing our capital. These guys are really good. They are doing great job. I remember when Matthew, when he was uh, sick, he has very high temperature. He arrived to our base to conduct training together with Gia and the rest of guys. So I really trust these people, and if Americans want to support some non-governmental organization, of course it's Sons of Liberty.
Thank
Okay.
you. So, yeah, that's sonsoflibertyinternational.com. I'll probably like plug the
Hmm.
website in later on X.
Yep. Yeah, I- I'm kind of curious. I would like later, sooner or later on, talk with them too, just to kind of get what they do and get them down on information for people to go back and watch.
I'll work
But
on that. Yeah.
um, but if you don't have anything else, I think we're going to go ahead and let him get back to enjoying his leave. Um, do you have a time that you're going? How long do you have before you go back?
Uh, be- I think like I still have a couple of days before the next mission because people very often people are wounded. They cannot continue to fight. It means that we should make more efforts. We should go for a mission more often than normally. But for now, I think I still have a couple of days to rest.
To rest. Yeah. So I do want to thank you for taking the time out, and I'm glad you came back from all the ones safe. And you know, I hope that when you go back, of course, that you stay safe and bring back all those soldiers back. So
Thank you guys also for giving me an opportunity to tell my story, to tell story of those people who cannot, unfortunately, cannot tell
yes,
it anymore. And thank you, and
yes.
thank you to all the American people.
And just you
As
have
well.
you have an open invitation. You can get a hold of Gia or whatever, or get a hold of me directly. And if you have something else you want to tell us, something this is an open forum, so you're always welcome to come back and we can set something up.
Okay, nice, thank you.
Mhm.
I will probably share also some pictures
Yep.
from our work. I already sent some of them to Gia, and just take my number, write me on Signal or WhatsApp. I will send it to you as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think Gia has my signal number and stuff like that, so she can share it with you, and we'll go from
Okay.
there.
Stay
So,
safe out there, and thank you for all you're doing and saving those soldiers' lives.
I
and
will do my best.
And stay alive, definitely. I always
yes,
tell that to everybody.
yes,
Just stay alive.
yep. Stay alive. That's the number one
I'm
thing. Stay
planning to
alive.
visit Mexico once. You remember?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, you got to stay alive for that. You need to go try all the different foods and look at all the different. There's a lot of different cultures even within Mexico. So that's even I haven't seen Mexico. Someone asked me about that yesterday. They're like, you don't even know your own country. You haven't visited all the different parts of your own country, and that kind of shocked me. That oh yeah, maybe I know the U.S. and Europe more than I know my own country that I was born in. So that's on my bucket list as well. To get to know my own roots, so to speak.
And there's one thing
Yes.
is, if you come down after that, I mean, because me and Gia are pretty close together, and she's a state over from me, so not very far away. So we can all get
Yeah, we
together
can all get together.
do something.
Yes. Thank you again.
Mhm. All right. Like I said, be safe, be good, and like I said, anytime you want to come back, just get a hold of Gia, or if you get a hold of me or something like that, and we'll set something up.
Yes. I think it's not our last interview.
Sweet. I like to hear that, because yeah, this is one thing that people need to be educated on. So, and that's
Mhm.
what we've decided to try to bring this to. So, but well, I'm going to let you go. Enjoy the rest of your time off, because I know it's almost, you're what, 6-7 hours ahead,
Yeah, 8 hours ahead.
Mhm.
Mm.
8 hours ahead. So yeah, it's almost 10 o'clock
Mm.
there. So, um, but yeah, thank you again, and yeah, keep in touch.
See you.
All right,
See you.
bye bye.